Breaking. An unprecedented institutional explosion has just detonated at the heart of the British state, as King Charles effectively declared war on Keir Starmer's government. What began as a simmering disagreement over the nation's future has spiraled into a catastrophic power struggle that threatens to shatter the delicate constitutional balance held together for 3 centuries. The monarch and the prime minister are no longer speaking. They are competing for the very soul and sovereignty of the United Kingdom. This is not a mere policy dispute. It is a brutal, high-stakes collision of legitimacy that has left Westminster paralyzed and the public in a state of total shock. The invisible lines that separate the crown from the cabinet have been crossed, and the fallout is currently tearing through the halls of power like a tidal wave. If you need to understand how the British system is currently collapsing in real time, you must hit that subscribe button immediately, because the revelations surfacing from behind palace walls are unlike anything witnessed in modern history.
The ignition point occurred during a private audience that was supposed to be a routine formality, but ended in a chilling, absolute silence. Insiders report that for the first time in his reign, King Charles refused to offer the traditional nod of assent to a key government direction, signaling a total breakdown in the relationship between the head of state and his first minister. The atmosphere inside the room was described as radioactive. While Starmer attempted to assert the mandate of the ballot box, the king reportedly stood his ground, representing a centuries-old duty to the people that transcends temporary political majorities. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated tension that lasted only minutes, but has already triggered a crisis that could last for generations. The prime minister left the palace not with a partner, but with a rival. Within hours of this silent confrontation, the machinery of the state began to fracture. Downing Street, sensing a threat to its supreme authority, issued a briefing so sharp and so dismissive of the monarchy's role that senior civil servants were seen visibly shaking as they read the memos. The government's message was a blunt instrument. Power belongs to the elected, and the crown is a relic that must stay silent or face the consequences. But the British public, already weary of institutional failure and political cynicism, did not react the way Number 10 expected. Instead of a rally for the government, a surge of silent support began to coalesce around the palace. The battle lines are now drawn in permanent ink.
This is a betrayal of the unwritten rules that keep Britain stable, and the government just gambled the entire constitution on a single act of defiance. The stakes are no longer about legislation or budgets. They are about who holds the moral right to lead a nation in distress. As the sun sets over the Thames, the lights in the Cabinet Office remain on, but the authority that usually radiates from that building has vanished. The Prime Minister is standing on the edge of a precipice, and the King has stopped reaching out to save him. This is a system in total, irreversible failure, and the explosion has only just begun. The reality of this institutional war is now spilling out into the streets, where the contrast between the two sides has become a source of national outrage. While Keir Starmer was photographed surrounded by armed security and grim-faced advisors entering a luxury gala, King Charles was seen in a grainy, unofficial video speaking with ordinary citizens outside a community center, listening to the very grievances the government has spent months ignoring. The optics are not just bad, they are fatal. We're seeing a prime minister who looks like a besieged manager and a king who looks like a protector. This is the ultimate nightmare for any elected leader, losing the moral high ground to an institution that doesn't need a single vote to be loved. The fallout reached a fever pitch last night when a leaked internal memo from the Home Office revealed that the government had actively considered curtailing the King's public engagements to prevent him from overshadowing the Prime Minister's upcoming announcements. The sheer arrogance of the plan sent shockwaves through the military and the civil service. To many, this wasn't just politics, it was a coup against the nation's heritage. Staff at Whitehall are reportedly in a state of open mutiny, with some refusing to draft responses that attack the palace. The internal organs of the British state are starting to reject the government's leadership like a foreign body. But then, the king made a move that no one in Downing Street saw coming. Through a source close to the duchy, it was revealed that the Crown would be launching its own independent national initiative to address the exact social crises the government has claimed are unfixable due to budget constraints. It was a masterstroke of institutional warfare.
By acting where the government only talks, the king didn't just break protocol, he rendered the government's excuses obsolete. He is essentially proving that the crown can provide the leadership that the cabinet cannot. The response from Starmer's inner circle was one of pure panicked fury.
And here is what makes the situation even more dangerous for the Prime Minister. While he struggles to keep his own cabinet from leaking against one another, the palace is operating with the silent, lethal precision of an institution that has survived for 1,000 years. There are no shouting matches in the palace corridors, only a cold, calculated execution of moral authority. The public can feel the shift. The polls are already beginning to show a terrifying trend for the Labour Party. The more they attack the king, the faster their support evaporates. They are fighting an enemy they cannot arrest and a tradition they cannot erase. The economic consequences of this war hit the city like a lightning strike this morning. Financial markets, which crave stability above all else, reacted with pure terror to the news of a constitutional breakdown. The pound began a jagged descent as international investors questioned the viability of a government at war with its own head of state. Over £4 billion in market value vanished in the time it took for the morning news cycle to conclude. Traders are no longer betting on policy, they are betting on whether the government will even exist by the end of the month. The instability is no longer a threat, it is the current reality.
Inside the House of Commons, the atmosphere has descended into a bear pit of accusations and betrayal. Backbenchers, who only months ago were cheering for the Prime Minister, are now seen huddled in corners, whispering about exit strategies and transitional leadership. The fear in the tea rooms is palpable. They know that in a fight between a temporary politician and a permanent throne, history rarely favors the politician. One veteran MP was overheard saying that Starmer has signed his own political death warrant by forcing the king into a corner. The sense of an impending coup is no longer a whisper, it is a roar. International allies are looking at London with a mixture of pity and alarm. From Washington to Paris, the question is being asked, has the UK lost its mind? Diplomatic cables have surfaced suggesting that foreign leaders are reconsidering scheduled visits, unwilling to be caught in the crossfire of a civil war at the heart of the British establishment. The nation's global standing is being incinerated in real time as the Prime Minister doubles down on his confrontation. He is becoming a pariah on the world stage, a leader who cannot even manage his own backyard.
The moral illegitimacy of the government's position was laid bare when a group of senior bishops issued a rare joint statement, not naming Starmer, but speaking of the sacred duty of those in power to respect the institutions that guard the nation's soul. The message was a hammer blow. It was the establishment turning its back on the administration. The Prime Minister is now fighting a war on 3 fronts: against the king, against his own party, and against the very moral foundations of the country. Every move he makes to assert his power only serves to highlight how much of it he has already lost. That is when the most devastating revelation of all leaked to the press. A series of private WhatsApp messages from the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff showed a deliberate strategy to provoke the king into a public outburst, hoping to use it as a pretext to reform the monarchy and seize its assets. The plan was not just radical, it was predatory. It proves that the constitutional crisis wasn't an accident. It was a premeditated strike by a government that views the crown as an obstacle to its absolute control. The discovery of this Project Silence has turned the initial disagreement into a full-scale national emergency.
The backlash has been instantaneous and total. Across the country, from the Highlands to the South Coast, people are realizing that their government isn't just failing to lead, it is actively trying to dismantle the country's identity to save its own failing reputation. Protests have begun to form outside the gates of Downing Street, not with political banners, but with the Union Jack. The people are reclaiming the symbols that the government tried to weaponize against the king. It is a grassroots uprising of the silent majority, and it is terrifying the political class to its core. The Prime Minister's response to the leak was a disaster. He appeared on television looking gaunt, his voice cracking as he tried to deny the authenticity of the messages while simultaneously asserting that no one is above the law. It was a hollow, desperate performance that convinced no one. Instead of calming the waters, he poured petrol on the fire. He looked like a man who knew the walls were closing in, a leader who had run out of lies. The contrast with the king, who spent the afternoon at a military hospital without a single camera crew in tow, could not be more devastating. This is the moment of peak institutional collapse. We are watching a prime minister who has lost the ability to govern and a king who has been forced to step into the vacuum. The system is broken. The machinery of democracy is grinding to a halt because the trust that lubricates it has been permanently destroyed. The question is no longer whether Starmer can win this war, but how much of the country he will destroy before he is finally removed. The countdown to a formal leadership challenge has moved from days to hours.
The next 48 hours will determine the fate of the United Kingdom for the next century. Parliament is set to convene for an emergency session where the Prime Minister will face a barrage of questions he cannot answer and a party he can no longer control. There are rumors that several cabinet ministers are preparing to resign in a coordinated mass exit to distance themselves from the constitutional wreckage. The air in Westminster is thick with the scent of a dying administration. This is the endgame, and it is being played out with a brutality that has shocked even the most cynical observers. Beyond the palace gates and the black door of number 10, the nation waits in a state of suspended animation. This crisis has touched a nerve that goes deeper than taxes or healthcare. It has forced every citizen to ask, who do I trust when the system fails? The answer is being written in the silence of the king and the frantic, failing noise of the prime minister. The crown has demonstrated a resilience that the cabinet simply does not possess. The invisible lines have been redrawn, and the government is on the wrong side of every single one of them.
Is this the end of the Starmer era, or will he attempt a final, desperate move to seize control of the state? The whispers of a state of emergency declaration are growing louder, but such a move would likely trigger a total national revolt. The government is out of options, out of time, and out of friends. They picked a fight with history, and history is currently winning. The constitutional territory we have entered is uncharted and lethally dangerous. There is no map for where we are going, only the certainty that we can never go back to how things were before this war erupted. Britain is holding its breath as the clock ticks toward a final, inevitable confrontation. The question that remains is simple. Who really holds the power when the masks fall off? Did Keir Starmer just commit the ultimate political suicide by trying to break the king? Or will this institutional war end in a way that no one, not the pundits, not the politicians, and not even the palace, ever saw coming? What do you think? Is the king right to stand his ground, or has he overstepped his bounds in a democratic age? Is Starmer a defender of the people's vote, or a tyrant in a suit? Drop your thoughts in the comments right now, because your voice is the only thing the politicians are still afraid of. Stay with us, because tomorrow we are revealing the identities of the 3 ministers currently meeting in secret to finalize the Prime Minister's removal. The truth is coming out, and it will change everything.